Hello, everyone, and welcome to this next edition of the Planning for Retirement podcast, where we help educate you on how retirement works. This is episode 49, volume 1 of the Whiteboard Retirement Plan. Should I retire with $1.5 million invested at age 65? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kevin Lau. I am a practicing financial advisor with over 15 years of experience, helping people prepare for and transition to retirement. And the goal of this podcast is to educate and empower you to retire with clarity and confidence. So this is a big time in the market right now. I know the markets are not the topic of conversation, but today is Wednesday, July 24th. When I'm recording this, this won't come out for another couple of weeks. And we've had some positive inflation readings over the last couple of weeks. Early July, we found that inflation actually reduced or decreased month over month by 0.1% and increased 3% over the last 12 months. That was, again, the July 11th reading for the month of June. Expectations were 3.1%. In addition to this, unemployment hit a 4.1% number, which is the highest it's been in quite some time, which is showing signs that the labor market is cooling. And the markets did like this, okay? The markets reacted very positively over the last couple of weeks because the Fed is on their path to hit their 2% number probably sooner than they initially anticipated. And you know, for those of you that have been following this podcast or following the news as of late, there's a good chance that the Fed they will reduce rates in September. Sorry, that was terrible. For those of you that have been following this podcast or been following the financial markets, there's a good chance that the Fed will reduce interest rates or cut interest rates in September. Okay. In fact, there was a 70% chance that there would be a rate cut in September. But after the June inflation report came out, that number jumped to 83%. This was sometime last week. And actually, as of today, I just saw there's a 100% probability. Okay. And this was according to the CME FedWatch data, that there's a 100% probability that the Fed will cut rates in September. So why is this important for the markets? Well, listen, stocks appreciate because of expectations. And about a year ago, the expectation was that we were going to slip into a recession and the Fed would have to cut rates eventually and in order to stimulate the economy and improve earnings, improve the earnings of the corporations that you and I invest in. But we've seen a run up in the stock market significantly over the last 12 months already, despite the fact that the Fed did run into some issues with inflation at the beginning of this year. The S&P 500 is up about 23% over the last 12 months. And if the Fed does run into trouble getting inflation down to that 2% number and the number of cuts don't align or potentially rate cuts don't happen in September, we could see some volatility. Okay, we could see markets sell off, or we could see potentially a correction or a bear market. But you know what? Frankly, this is normal. This is a normal part of investing. People think that they, just because you're investing and just because the S&P 500 has gone up 10% on average every single year over the last 30 plus years, that you're going to get 10.5%. That's not the case. Okay, returns are not generated linearly. Okay, in a straight line. Typically, they will go up and down. And so, 2023 was a good year for stocks. 2024 was a good year for stocks. So don't be surprised if we go through a correction or if we go through a recession at some point in 2025 or even 2026. And frankly, that's the concern right now is if we're in a situation where the Fed does have to cut, that probably doesn't bode well for how the economy is doing. Okay, in reality, I think that the reason the market has shot up was because the assumption that when the Feds do cut rates, that's going to stimulate the economy. It might not be right away. It could take a little bit of time. I just saw a headline this morning that new home sales are at the lowest point they've ever been over the last 7 years. That is going to impact the economy. The housing market is a big driver for the U.S. economy. Okay. And so just make sure that you have a fully diversified portfolio. You're not betting on one asset class. Okay. And you know who you are. Okay. I've talked to some of you that are very aggressively invested in big tech. Okay. Or maybe you're not even intentionally doing that. Maybe you're indexing, or maybe you're in an S&P 500 index fund and you think you're well diversified. Well, you got to check those funds. Okay, some of these are cap weighted. And essentially what that means is you're going to have more exposure into big tech just by way of those prices of those companies increasing substantially over the last decade. So just make sure you're fully diversified. Make sure you're introducing asset classes like small caps and mid caps and international stocks and even fixed income as part of your portfolio. Okay. I know those asset classes haven't been the top dog over the last 10 years, but that doesn't mean that there isn't value in the portfolio for those asset classes for diversification purposes. Okay. That's the whole point of diversification is you're not supposed to love everything in your portfolio. Okay. Every single year. Some of the things in your portfolio, by design, you shouldn't be a fan of. Okay. Because, if you're playing some defense, obviously the offense is going to be working 80% of the time. But when you need that defense, that 20% of the time, you're going to be grateful, especially for those of you that are drawing income from the portfolio. And if interest rates do drop, that actually does bode well for fixed income prices. The value of the bonds that you own will actually increase in value. And so I'm bullish on bonds. I am. I really do think that bonds have a place in the portfolio. I've always believed that. But I think from a return standpoint, we could actually see returns in excess of the coupon rates. Coupon rate is the interest that particular fixed income is paying. You might see 4%, 5% coupon rates on bonds. Well, if interest rates go down, those 4 or 5% coupons are now more valuable. So the prices go up. So you could, in fact, actually turn around and sell it if it does appreciate, if you wanted to. Okay. Now, obviously, if you're using the fixed income for cash flow purposes or for asset dedication purposes, that's a different story. But if you're just looking for returns, that could be an area that you actually see some price appreciation if interest rates do drop. Okay, so just make sure you're fully diversified. Make sure you're not overweight into one asset class. And most importantly, if you've been sitting on the sideline waiting for the right time to get in the market, this is the time to really kick yourself and say, listen, I thought we were going to go into a recession over the last couple of years. Okay, 2022, maybe you pulled out of the market in 2022. Yeah, because things were so volatile. Well, 2023 was a great year for stocks. 2024 so far, great year for stocks. Okay, stop waiting for the right time to get in because there's never the right time. It's never the right time. Well, the right time, actually, technically speaking, is 10 years ago. Okay, and the second best right time is probably today. Okay, and oddly enough, the market is down today. Okay, pretty aggressively. I think the NASDAQ is down 3% today. The S&P 500 is down somewhere around 1.8%. Okay, so there's some volatility today. I think, largely because big tech did not deliver their earnings. Okay, the market was not happy with big tech's earnings, and that's not surprising because big tech has been flying up in prices over the last year. And so it's going to be tough for them to continue to deliver those returns and carry the market. So that's why I urge you for diversification, because you might see international be the lead dog. You might see small caps and mid caps be the lead dog over the next few years. And you don't want to be that person that's all in on big tech just because that's been the lead dog over the last 5 to 10 years. And all of a sudden now you're lagging behind. All right, that's enough on the market. So last time I teased this whiteboard retirement plan. Okay, this concept of this whiteboard retirement plan. And essentially just to kind of think of it as like a back of the napkin retirement plan. But instead of a napkin, we have a whiteboard. And obviously, I'm not in front of the whiteboard now, but I'm going to get there in a second. And the goal of this series, okay, and my thinking initially is maybe do this every, once a month or once every couple of months. But the goal of this series is to help answer the question, can I retire? And notice how I said can and not should, because just because you can doesn't mean you should. And you know what I mean? And just as a heads up, listen, we are recording this on video. And so if you're listening on just audio, just know that the video version is available on Spotify and YouTube. So make sure to subscribe on those channels if you're able to. But if you are following along on audio only, it might be a little bit challenging. However, I will do my best to make sure that this content is still valuable to you. Okay. But of course, like I said, if you want to check out the video version, that's ideal. Go to Spotify, go to the YouTube versions, and make sure to subscribe on both of those channels. And you'll be able to see my vest that I'm wearing today, Sweetens Cove Golf Club. Of course, why not? I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee now. And so why not? Of course, I'm going to wear my Sweetens Cove vest once in a while now. So I played this course a couple of years ago, and it is amazing. So I can't wait to play it again. I think right now they're redoing the greens or We're having some issues with the course conditions. So I'm looking forward to getting back out there now that I'm only 25 or so minutes away. So we're going to have some fun with this series. I'm actually very excited because I love teaching on the whiteboard. And I think with a lot of these Zoom meetings, over the last few years, it's been a little bit more difficult to teach on the whiteboard, but my office setup is conducive for this. And I think it's also kind of cool because we can hit on so many different topics in one episode. A lot of times, the episodes we put out there are very topic specific. We're going to talk all about NUA or net unrealized appreciation, or we're going to talk about Section 121 for capital gains exclusions on a primary residence. This one, we're going to kind of touch on a variety of topics. And so, I just want to disclose that this is a whiteboard retirement plan. Okay. So this is back of the napkin. So I recognize that things like inflation or taxes, it's going to be very tough for us to really dial into there. And I really want to keep the numbers very even. Okay. So I've altered the numbers on all of these cases to make sure that they're easy to follow. So yeah, we just want to, we want to have some fun with this. We want to provide a ton of value. And if you're interested in showcasing your situation, okay, obviously anonymously, and you can submit this anonymously to me as well. Okay. And so if you want to be a part of this, if you want your situation to be on this series, this Whiteboard Retirement Plan series, you can go to the show notes, go to the Retirement Readiness Survey. There's a link there. You can fill out the information. It doesn't ask for anything confidential. You can just use your first name. It does ask for your email address. So you'll be on our newsletter. So you won't regret it. Don't worry. But if you want to be a part of that series, fill out that retirement readiness and go ahead and put in the other notes section. If there's anything else you want us to know, just indicate that this is for the whiteboard retirement breakdown. Okay. So just indicate something about the whiteboard retirement plan, and I will make sure to notate that, and we'll put that in a future series. So if you're curious to know, can I retire today? This is your opportunity to get a breakdown by a professional. Someone's been doing this for a little while, been doing this for over 15 years, and provide some education and value. And that's also helpful to other people that have maybe a similar fact pattern as you. Make sure to fill out that retirement readiness survey in the show notes. So we're going to jump over to the whiteboard now. So I will see you shortly. All right, guys, here we are. Here's the setup here, the Whiteboard Retirement Plan. We've got the WBRP acronym. So I don't know, that acronym is a little bit of a mouthful, but we'll work on that over time. But we're going to break down the high-level facts of this first edition of the Whiteboard Retirement Plan series. So we've got a couple. We've got male who's 65. We've got a 65-year-old and a 62-year-old. His wife is 62. So those are the current ages. What that is today. So 2024. Draw a little timeline here. The husband is working. He's 65. Total income right now is $130,000. So $130,000 as income today. Wife is not currently working. He is saving the max amount to his company 401k plan, which for 2024, we've got $23,000, which is the regular contribution plus an additional $7,500 catch up because he is over the age of 50. So that's a total of about $30,500 that he's currently saving for retirement, which translates into a 23% savings rate. That's pretty darn good. Okay, 23% savings rate especially of gross income is phenomenal. They typically say good savers, 10 to 15% of income, pretty good saver. Once you get to 20%, you're a rock star. 25 plus, you're looking to retire early, much earlier than your peers. And they're looking to, when they retire, they need about $100,000 a year in retirement is the goal. Okay, so let me erase. So savings rate looks good. Current income is what it is, but their goal is to generate $100,000 a year of cash flow. This is their goal. Okay. So what's going on? So we've got husband has about $1.5 million in investment assets. Okay. So wife was mostly a stay-at-home mom. And so she does not have any retirement assets. But as we know, as I know, as I'm learning today, that's ridiculous because being a stay-at-home mom is a heck of a lot harder than working full-time. I'll just tell you that much. But anyways, so $1.5 million is the total asset level. Okay. And I'm not going to break down whether it's pre-tax, post-tax, or or brokerage just yet. Let's just use $1.5 million as the total number today. Total investment portfolio. So we've got $1.5 million. All right. Now, income sources. Now, what are the income sources going to be? Okay. So we've mapped this out, and essentially what he did was he sent me his full retirement age benefit. So based on his birth year, his full retirement age for Social Security when he's going to maximize his primary insurance amount will be age 66 and 10 months because he was born in 1959. And if he were to take Social Security at his full retirement age when he's 66 years old in 10 months, so about a couple of years away, his benefit will be $3,000 a month. And again, I'm always going to round these numbers slightly. So this client has a little bit off of 1.5 million. It's a little bit over 1.5, but I'm going to just use nice, easy round numbers for this exercise. So income sources, we have Social Security, and I'm going to call him Bob, and I'm going to call the wife Jennifer. So Bob and Jennifer. So we've got Social Security from Bob in the amount of $3,000 a month or $36K per year. We'll use the annual numbers. And then we've got Social Security for Jennifer, which is much less. The full retirement age benefit for her was about $12,000 per year. So right away, we got a planning opportunity. Okay, we've got a planning opportunity where we have one worker who is the higher earner during the course of their working years, and we have another also spouse, U.S. citizen, who didn't work as long as the husband, is eligible for her own benefit, but essentially could also be eligible for spousal benefits because she is also married to someone who's eligible for Social Security. So we'll talk about that shortly, but this is going to play a factor. But the problem is, they're 65 and 62 today. That's not going to be until another about 2 years, roughly, they'll have Social Security, or he will have eligible for Social Security as his full retirement age. But even here, 4, 5, take him to 70 and 67. Age 70 would be the latest he could claim Social Security. This would be his latest retirement age. Okay, delaying it past 70, there's no value there. There's no benefit. Okay, and so by extending his Social Security benefit beyond age 66 and 10 months, he will have an increase of 8% annually. And so if you were to delay until 70, he could collect about $4,000 a month or about $48,000 per year. So we'll just kind of keep that in mind. I'm not going to write that number just yet because I want to talk about some other key points here in the financial plan. So just at a very high level, if he were to retire now and he needs $100,000, if you were to divide that into the total investment portfolio of $1.5 million, what does that give you? Let's do a quick little calculator here. That's about a 6.67% rate of withdrawal. This translates into 6.67% withdrawal rate. WD rate, okay? Why is that important? Well, you've heard us talk about the 4% rule many times on this podcast. And the 4% rule, for those of you that don't know, was made popular by Bill Bengen. And he did the back testing research and figured out there is never a 30-year period where someone started with a 4% rate of withdrawal and actually depleted their assets, even if they adjusted their withdrawals by inflation on an annual basis. There's never been a period of time where that has actually happened. Okay. And so if we're starting with a 6.67% rate of withdrawal, we're above the benchmark of 4%. I'm not saying I recommend someone draw 4% or use the 4% rule to the T. I just use it as a benchmark simply. And if we're above 4%, we just need to take into consideration that there's a chance I might need to make an adjustment to my withdrawal rate at some point down the road, i.e. that's where we come in with guardrails and that's where we set those parameters, the upper rail and the lower rail, to make sure if we hit the upper or the lower threshold, we make the adjustments that we need. Okay. But if we just look at the withdrawal rate, if he were to retire today, we're at a 6.67% rate of withdrawal. Okay. Now, he could also just start Social Security straight away. Okay. At 65, he is eligible to start Social Security at age 62. That would be his earliest retirement age. And so if he did take it at 62, not that he is, but if he did take it at 62, it would just be simply a reduction of benefits up to 30% of the benefit. Okay. So instead of collecting $3,000 a month, it would be $3,000 a month minus the percentage of the reduction. Now, that's going to impact them in a couple of different ways. Number one, obviously, is he's going to lock in a lower amount. Okay. So there'll be a lower amount that he will be collecting in his Social Security in perpetuity. But then the second thing is going to impact is the survivor benefit. Okay. Because Jennifer's Social Security benefit is lower than Bob's. If Bob were to predecease Jennifer, Jennifer is going to take over Bob's benefit, okay? Because the rule is for a survivor, they will either continue their own benefit or take their spouse's benefit, whichever is higher. And in this case, Bob's benefit would be higher, so she would actually take Bob's benefit if Bob were to predecease Jennifer, okay? Well, if Bob locks in a lower benefit than $36,000 a year, let's say that number is $28,000 a year, and he passes away, well, Jennifer's going to only continue to collect $28,000 per year, not $36,000 per year. Okay. So this is one of those planning areas that we really focus on with married couples. If you have one spouse who's a higher earner and we have the opportunity to maximize their benefit by either waiting until full retirement age, okay, which is right around here, or delaying until 70 in order to impact the lower earners' survivor benefit, that's a conversation point, okay? Especially if Jennifer, and I don't know about Jennifer's health, Jennifer, if she's superwoman health, this could be a value add to say, hey, instead of Bob taking his benefit at 66 and 10 months, which would be his full retirement age, maybe delaying it until 70 because that's going to increase 8% a year. And then instead of collecting $36,000, he'd be collecting $48,000 per year. If Jennifer not in rock star health, or maybe Bob and Jennifer are both not in great health, they're not likely to live very long, maybe it makes more sense to just start claiming Social Security straight away, or maybe wait until full retirement age and then claim Social Security. But what about Jennifer? So Jennifer's got a lower benefit, and that benefit amount is about $12,000 a year if she were to wait until her full retirement age, which is 67. Or she can claim the spousal benefit. Okay, so how does the spousal benefit work in this scenario? Well, the first scenario is Bob has to be claiming his benefit. Okay, so if Bob retired this year and didn't start his Social Security benefits, let's say until 70, Jennifer can't start the spousal benefit until he starts claiming his benefit. So if he waits until 70, she'll be 67 at that point in time. So he'll collect his $48,000 per year, and then she'll collect half of Bob's primary insurance amount, which we already said was $36,000 per year. So half of $36,000 is $18,000 per year. So if they were to delay Social Security for another 5 years after retirement and waited until 70 and 67, this would be the max Social Security benefit package that they could get, which would be Bob's latest retirement age, which is his primary insurance amount inflated at 8% a year. And then Jennifer would get half of Bob's primary insurance amount. Now, if Jennifer started, let's say Bob did start his benefit at 65, Jennifer technically could start a spousal benefit at 62, but it would also be reduced, okay, by that corresponding percentage. Alternatively, if Bob does delay until 70, that opens up the door for Jennifer to actually claim her own benefit for a period of time, not even claim the spousal benefit, okay? So if Jennifer did that, she would come over here, and let's say instead of collecting $12,000 a year, which is her primary insurance amount on her own earnings, okay, remember, she did work for a period of time before staying home with the kids, maybe that number is $10,000 per year. So essentially what they can do is start getting some cash flow into the household as a guaranteed income source based on her benefit. And then once Bob does go on his own Social Security, now Jennifer can switch over and go from her own benefit over to the spousal benefit. So she could essentially, for 8 years, collect payments of $10,000. Maybe not 8 years, sorry, 5 years. She can collect this $10,000 for 5 years. And then once this happens, and then Bob switches over to his max benefit at age 70, Now she can get the spousal benefit, which is again half of Bob's primary insurance amount, which is again $18,000 per year. And so essentially that would be a way for them to get money into the household from Social Security without Bob wasting his benefit by claiming early. So allowing him to delay the benefit, maximize that spousal benefit for Jennifer, while at the same time getting some cash flow into the household. So that's, again, some planning scenarios. And I always joke with clients, listen, tell me exactly when you're going to pass away, and I'll tell you exactly what the best claiming strategy is for Social Security. It's impossible. Okay. So, but let's say Bob and Jennifer are good health. It probably makes sense for at least Bob to delay his benefit at least until full retirement age, if not until 70, if they can swing it. And then that way it'll maximize Jennifer's survivor benefit. And then Jennifer could do a combo strategy where she starts with her own benefit for a while. Once Bob gets on Social Security, now she can claim the spousal benefit and get that $18,000 a year coming in. Okay, so let's say they went with that strategy. And instead of claiming it at 65, let's assume Bob hypothetically retired today. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years until age 70. 2, 3, 73. So we already said they need $100,000 per year. They have $1.5 million. If we simply divide 100,000 by 1.5 million, we get a 6.67% rate of withdrawal, which we already talked about is over the benchmark. But I'm not scared. Okay, I'm not worried about that because a couple of things. Number one, the portfolio is going to be generating some return. So it's not like 1.5 million. We're just spending it down and not earning anything. I mean, we could even get a 1-year CD for north of 4%. So we're not going to be depleting the portfolio dollar for dollar. Maybe we have some returns to help offset that withdrawal. Okay, but for a few years, we're not going to be having it. We're really not going to have very much cash flow coming into the portfolio other than Jennifer's $10,000 per year. So instead of needing to withdraw $100,000 from the portfolio, because Jennifer's taking her Social Security benefit at 62, we only need $90,000. So that does move the needle a little bit. So if we take 90,000, divide that in by 1.5 million, get 6%. A little bit better, a little bit more palatable, okay? But 6% rate of withdrawal for a few years. And then at 70, now Bob's going to take his Social Security benefit of $48,000. And Jennifer will take the spousal benefit, because once Bob starts his own benefit, now that opens the door for the spousal benefit, Jennifer will be taking $18,000 from this. So now we have a total of $66,000 per year that's coming in from Social Security alone, okay? So now what is our delta? Again, I'm ignoring inflation right now. I'm ignoring any investment returns now because this is a whiteboard retirement plan, okay? So ignoring any inflation, we need $100,000. We're getting 66. Again, we're talking pre-tax money at this point in time. So now the delta, if we need 100 minus 66, that gives us $34,000 equals the delta. All right. So if the delta is $34,000, let's assume the portfolio did dip in value a little bit. Okay. So let's assume we weren't earning 6% on the portfolio and then adjusted for inflation each year. Maybe we're earning 4% or 4.5% or 5% a year. The portfolio is going to be coming down. But let's assume a very extreme scenario. Let's assume that they were pulling out $90,000 for 5 years, which is $450,000. And let's say the portfolio didn't grow a dime. Okay. So now we need $34,000. If we divide that by $1,050,000, okay, what do we get? 3.2%. 3.2% is the rate of withdrawal. Beginning at age 70 and 67, when they're getting the maximum amount for Social Security, okay? And we already talked about the 4% benchmark. So where are we now? We started above the benchmark. Now we had a depletion of the portfolio for a few years because they weren't taking any Social Security. But now, once that Social Security turns on, now we're below the benchmark. We're sitting at about 3.2%. So that's substantially lower, which means there's a very strong probability that this portfolio, this $1,050,000, will increase over time in excess of inflation and in excess of the portfolio withdrawals. Now, that's going to be contingent on how the portfolio is invested, whether or not they're staying invested, they're staying disciplined as part of the plan. But this is good to know, to kind of see, hey, yes, early on, if you don't take Social Security, You might be depleting your portfolio pretty aggressively, okay? Maybe more aggressively than you might be comfortable with. But at some point in time, when that cash flow comes in from Social Security, maybe it's a pension and Social Security, that's going to reduce your rate of withdrawal. And that's what you need to stress test. You need to look at pre-Social Security, pre-guaranteed cash flow, and then post-Social Security, post-guaranteed cash flow to compare and contrast. And someone with a 3.2% rate of withdrawal, they're going to have an underspending problem. Okay. What I mean by that, if the goal is to maximize legacy to the children or to charity, that's great. But if that's not the goal, I was just talking to some clients yesterday, they don't have children. They want to maximize what they're spending. And if you're doing a 3.2% rate of withdrawal and your portfolio is even reasonably invested from a diversification perspective, you're going to underspend substantially. And so the conversation for them, okay, if legacy is not important, if financial legacy is not important, maybe they want to gift more during lifetime to their family. We've talked about this in the die with zero concept, giving with the warm hand as opposed to the cold one. So maybe they have adult children in their 30s or 40s at some point, and all of a sudden they're starting families, they're starting businesses, they're buying homes, they're getting married, all of that stuff. Maybe there's grandchildren. Potentially you want to gift to those family members during your lifetime as opposed to waiting until you pass away. Okay. So with this scenario, with a 3.2% rate of withdrawal, sure, for spending, you only might need 3.2%, but maybe there's an excess. Maybe you want to do some gifting to your family members, or maybe there is no children. Maybe there's a charity that is really important to you and you want to gift some to that charity now, as opposed to waiting until you pass away. I'm sure that organization would be much happier getting your money today than waiting another 30 years potentially until you pass away. Who knows if they're even going to be around at that point in time. So, a nonprofit, a charitable organization is always going to have more value with your money today, time value of money, than in the future. Okay, so thinking about that. Another thing that really should be considered here as well is long-term care planning. Okay, I'd say 50% of my clients will go through into retirement without any long-term care insurance, and 50% will have some kind of insurance. And when I say some kind of insurance, I'm saying some amount of insurance. Okay. Now, the flavors of the different products out there, there's too many to even go through in one podcast episode. We've talked about this before with our long-term care planning series. So go back and listen to those episodes 22, 23, and 24. It's all about long-term care planning. And I had my friends over from BC Brokerage join those 3 episodes, and they were phenomenal. Just talking about the traditional long-term care insurance products, the new hybrid products, which are becoming super popular. And then also I talked a little bit about self-funding. So go back to that. But long-term care planning is going to be huge for anyone approaching retirement, because the reality is, the statistics will say 70% of people over the age of 65 will need some kind of long-term care during retirement. Okay. And so what if you're that 70%, or what if you're in the 30%, right? I literally see people every single day. They try the best they can. They don't want to pay insurance costs. Okay. So they self-fund or they self-insure. And they have such a difficulty spending down this portfolio in fear that what if they need long-term care later? They don't want to be a burden on anyone. They don't want to be a burden on their loved ones. They don't want their children to care for them later on. And so they have such a difficult time spending down their investment portfolio in fear of what might happen in the future. Okay. So if that's you might benefit from getting some long-term care insurance. Okay. If nothing else, to free up your spouse to spend the money on care, as opposed to, hey, not really sure if we can afford it. I don't want to spend down this principal of $1,050,000. I want to keep that intact because who knows how much longer I'm going to live. Okay, so if my husband, let's say Bob, needs care, Jennifer's worried about spending down the portfolio. Jennifer, without long-term care insurance, might just do the caregiving herself. And that's facts. 70% of care is being provided by unpaid caregivers today. So if you're one of those individuals that's like, hey, I don't know if I can spend the money, I don't know if we have the money to self-fund long-term care, it might benefit you from getting long-term care insurance to have a dedicated pool of assets to pay for care if it's needed. But that's a big what if. I mean, someone who needs memory care around the clock for 5 years, that could easily wipe out $1 million portfolio. Okay. I don't want to be that dramatic, but that's the reality. I mean, you never know. But on the flip side of that, Bob and Jennifer may never need care. Okay. Or maybe the care is needed in the last month of life and they pass away peacefully after a month of needing some care. Maybe that's covered partly under Medicare. Okay, so Medicare doesn't cover long-term care, but they do cover some short-term care, and but that's a consideration is long-term care. And I'll just say that's especially important if financial legacy is super important to the client. Okay, so if Bob and Jennifer, if they have a goal of preserving their assets, preserving their estate to their, let's say, their 3 children, maybe they do get some long-term care insurance to protect those assets, okay, to make sure that they don't need to spend those down in the event they needed long-term care. If legacy is not as important, and if we project out, or if you project out that you have a little bit of a buffer at the end of your life to self-fund care, or maybe you even use your home, maybe you do a reverse mortgage or a cash out refinance or home equity line of credit, whatever that might be. Maybe there's funds in your home equity to pay for care. I think it's largely going to be dependent on the personal financial goals of the client. Okay, the clients I was talking about yesterday who don't have any children, they don't want to maximize legacy, so they could self-fund. Okay, but I think the conversation needs to be had in terms of how much is available to self-fund if spouse A needs care first. Okay, so how much can spouse B pay for care without having to deplete their portfolio, without running the risk of them running out of money later on in their life? Because that's a big scenario, especially if there's an age gap. Okay, in this scenario, there's only a 3-year age gap, but I've seen scenarios where maybe the husband's 65 and the wife's 50. Okay, well, if the husband needs care and he's 80, the spouse is 65. If he needs care at 80, he might live another couple of years and he's passed away. She's only 67. She could live another 30 years per se. And so I think the concern around outliving one's assets after spending money on the first person to need care, that's a big concern for a lot of people. And that oftentimes leads them to underspend early on in the go-go years, which we've talked about before. So long-term care planning is a big one for them. The second opportunity I see is on tax planning. Okay. What you don't know, what I didn't go over yet, is that 80% of their assets, about $1.2 million, are in tax-deferred accounts. And 20% of their assets, or about $350,000, are in taxable assets or brokerage accounts. Okay. They don't have any Roth accounts yet. So what that means is the $1.2 million is going to be subject to required minimum distributions when Bob turns 73. Okay. So at 73, he's going to be forced to take out RMDs. And what's interesting in this scenario is the rate of withdrawal that they need is 3.2%. After they're both on Social Security, okay, which at 73, they'll both be on Social Security, the maximum benefit at that point in time. And the first withdrawal for an RMD at 73 is about 3.65%. So even though they only need 3.2, they're taking out 3.65%. Otherwise, they're going to get dinged with a penalty from the IRS. If you fail to meet an RMD, require minimum distribution, there used to be a 50% penalty. Now it's a 25% penalty, but nonetheless, it's a penalty. And so in order to satisfy those required minimum distributions, you need to take those withdrawals out. So essentially what this is going to do to Bob and Jennifer, it's going to force them to spend income from this tax-deferred account, pay regular ordinary income taxes on it, and over time, that number is going to continue to grow. So it doesn't stay at 3.65%. It does increase over time. I mean, at age 85, you're looking in somewhere in the 8 to 9% range in terms of required minimum distribution percentage. So this is an opportunity I see to really strongly consider Roth conversions, because if they did retire now, let's say they retired at 65, they have about 8 years until Bob turns 73. They could slowly begin to convert some of their assets from the tax-deferred side into the tax-free side, pay the taxes, obviously. Now, those taxes could come from the other taxable brokerage account, which is nice and clean. If they didn't have any taxable brokerage assets, might be a little bit more challenging to pay the taxes, might be less of an argument for that. But because what I do know is that Bob and Jennifer, it is important for them to leave a financial legacy to their 3 children, the Roth conversion strategy would be a potentially a home run plan to minimize taxes to the next generation. Okay. For those of you that have tax deferred accounts, whether it be an IRA or 401k, get familiar with the 10-year rule. Okay. And the impact of leaving those assets to the next generation, not to your spouse, but to the next generation. Okay. So if that's important to you, financial legacy, and taxes are of concern, whether it be for you or for the next generation, really think about this Roth conversion plan. And so for them, they have 8 years until he starts that RMD those beginning payments that are for required minimum distributions, that's plenty of time to begin to plan to move those assets from those tax deferred accounts over to those tax-free accounts. Just a quick point on conversions. When you convert assets from a tax deferred account over to a tax-free account, you're gonna include that income in your tax return. Okay, it's going to be taxable income. And that income is also included in some important calculations, including how much of your Social Security is taxable and also whether or not you're going to be subject to IRMA. Everyone's favorite person in retirement is IRMA. That stands for Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. It's essentially a surcharge. If you make us over a certain amount, you're going to pay more for Medicare Part B and D. And so just keep that in mind as you're doing these conversions, not only looking at tax bracket management, but also looking at Medicare premiums. So I think the question that you all want to know is, can this person retire today? I think absolutely. The numbers are clear. They've done a great job saving to get to this point. And based on their expenditures, their rate of withdrawal is not outrageous. If they were starting out with a rate of withdrawal of 10 or 12%, okay, I might be a little bit concerned with that, okay? Because the sequence of return risk could really weigh heavily there, okay, if we went through a down market like a bear market or a recession. Given financial legacy is important to them, they have 3 children, I would, drawing down their portfolio to zero is not of interest. And given the fact that they don't have long-term care insurance, this is where I would start. Once they've kind of looked through all the numbers, they've crunched the numbers, obviously we want to look at their investment allocation. We want to make sure they're dialed in, from a tax optimization standpoint within their portfolio. They've got a sound asset location plan. They also have a sound plan in terms of where they're going to be taking income from the portfolio. I'd really make sure that they address that long-term care planning issue. Not that they don't have assets to self-fund. They could potentially self-fund, but if there was a need for care that lasted for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years to the first spouse, how is that going to impact the second spouse? If the second spouse is doing the caregiving and not paying the money, how is that going to impact their health? If the second spouse hires for care and they drain down their portfolio, how will that impact them financially? So I think they really have to address and be honest with this planning decision, is whether or not they should self-fund long-term care or whether they should have some kind of long-term care insurance in place. I also already hit on the tax piece, but I really would highly suggest, because legacy is important, to strongly consider the Roth conversion planning. I don't know much about the 3 children, but if one of them or multiple children are in a high tax bracket, that could be a beneficial reason to start to convert some of those tax deferred assets over into tax free, because the 10-year rule will still apply, but those Roth dollars will be tax free to the beneficiaries as opposed to fully taxable. Okay. And there's an 8-year difference between now until they start to take those required minimum distributions. Now, if he doesn't retire today, if Bob continues to work, let's say he wants to work until 70 just because he's having fun and he doesn't really know what to retire to, maybe that's a scenario where they look at some contributions into the Roth side as opposed to just building up that tax deferred account. They're already saving $30,000 plus per year. Maybe some of that should go into the Roth. And again, everyone's situation is different, but that would be something I would look into if he does want to continue to work over the next few years. Speaking of purpose, yes, this is something I would highly recommend trying to find. It's just purpose for your time. What do you look at? What is getting you out of bed in the morning? And I think that's really something I find a lot of retirees miss. They come to us, they're ready to retire, but they want to just talk numbers. They want to look at their investment portfolio. They want to look at a tax plan, for Roth conversions. They want to look at a Social Security claiming strategy. But finding purpose in retirement is so important, and I can't stress that enough. And we think it's so important that we actually created a questionnaire that you can download. It's in the show notes, so go to the show notes. And I think the title of it is going to be something like Purpose in Retirement Questions or Purpose in Retirement Questionnaire. You can click that link. It will ask for your email address, and that'll sign you up for our newsletter. If you don't want to be in our newsletter, just sign up and then unsubscribe later. But either way, it's going to allow you to download that PDF, and you can use that as a framework to start asking yourself some of these questions around where you're going to be finding meaning in retirement. And frankly, that's where you want to start. When you're thinking about retiring and you've got something that's taken up 40 to 50, even 60 hours a week of your time, what are you going to do with all that free time? All right. So make sure to check out that Purpose in Retirement PDF. It's phenomenal. Shout out to Roberto, our paraplanner, for putting that together. And that's it, everyone, for volume 1 of the Whiteboard Retirement Plan. And as you can see, Bob and Jennifer have done a great job. They are in a position to retire, but there are some risks. Their long-term care is a risk. Taxes are a risk. I also think sequence of return is a risk too. And taking those distributions slightly in excess of the 4% rule in that first, let's say, 5 years of retirement, they could run into some bad times in the market. So what's the plan to play defense if we did go through a recession in that first 5 years of retirement before they start taking Social Security? If they get through that first 5 years and get to age 70 and 67, now they're off and running. Now their rate of withdrawal goes down substantially because they're taking that Social Security into the household, and things are much more optimistic from there. But again, we've got to bridge that gap from pre-Social Security to claiming Social Security, and there's a variety of ways you can go about doing that. And of course, having an investment strategy. Okay, so having an optimized investment strategy that's aligned with the risk tolerance and the goals of the financial plan, letting the financial plan dictate your risk tolerance, not the media or an election or whatever it might be, political turmoil, unrest in the Middle East. There's always going to be something. There's always going to be a reason for you to not invest money. There's always going to be a reason for you to have fear. That's why they call them markets. Okay. If it wasn't a market, there wouldn't be any opportunities for returns. And so embrace it, have a process, have a plan, stick to the plan, implement the plan. Okay. But that's it for volume 1. I hope you found it helpful. And remember, if you want to be a part of this Whiteboard Retirement series, just submit your retirement readiness questionnaire to the show. You can go ahead and email us directly at info@imaginefinancialsecurity.com. Or you can just fill out the retirement readiness questionnaire that's in the show notes and just make sure to reference Whiteboard Retirement Plan somewhere in the text boxes. And again, if you want to stay informed with all of our retirement planning insights, make sure to follow our podcast wherever you're consuming podcasts. Make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. We're going to link both of those in our show notes. And if you're finding value in our content, that's awesome. And if you're loving the fact that it's free and we have no commercials, even better. Just make sure to follow the show and make sure to share the show with a friend who's in a similar boat. So that's it. I appreciate all of you. Y'all have been great. All of your support helps us a ton. It helps us to reach more people and make a bigger impact on the communities we serve. So I appreciate all of you. Until next time, this is Kevin Lau signing off.